All right, so let's give this a go. Lots of questions, and I'll do my best to try and answer these. Yeah, let's see how we do. All right. So what do you do with the inner critic during the process? Yeah. Good question. Good question. What do you do with the inner critic during the process? Okay. Well, so what do you do with the inner critic? So I guess whoa, my. All right. So the question was, so what do you do with the inner critic during the process? Let's just go back. So what do you do with the inner critic during the process? And this is kind of a jokey answer, but it's like, inner critics are people too. Okay. So that's at least the kind of reflexive response. I think more specifically, what's true? All right, here's the more complex. Whoa, check it out. Check it out. So we're doing things in kind of parallel. There's some interesting stuff I can show you about this, because like, what happens when one person's window of tolerance or activation runs into another person's? There's a whole interesting dynamic that happens when my wave runs into your wave and you're in an activated state. But no, we won't get there yet. Inner critic. So what do you do with the inner critic? Okay. The same thing that you do with a sensation that's painful, right? The same thing you do with an image that's a little scary, right? The thing about SciBAM, right? Because we drew SciBAM down here, right? As if this is the only way fracture can occur. It's not the only way fracture can occur. Another way that fracture can occur is your inner critic. Let me get rid of this. I don't think we need this. I'm not sure how. No, my symmetry. Okay. The truth is that just like we can break apart in, like trauma makes certain parts of us fragment off, sometimes different parts of us fragment off that are not just a SciBAM. So this is a variation. Sometimes one of the things that fragments off is something like the inner child that goes into exile. Okay, that's a term from IFS, but it's another thing that can happen. The SciBAM model is actually not complete, and this is one of the things that's just true. This is a longer class and a longer lecture, but it's not just sensation that can fracture off, or affect that can fracture off, or meaning that can fracture off. Our ability to play and be creative or childlike can fracture off. Our inner child can fracture off. And our inner critic might be another part that just takes hold, that gets very, very stiff. Anyhow, so the question about focusing is, what do you do when the inner critic is in the house? It's like, oh, okay. The first thing I would say is to unblend from it. Okay. So to notice the inner critic. And try and not have it be all up in your grill, right? Like the inner critic can be here and kind of like attacking and bouncing around, or it can be like, oh, there's the inner critic. Mm-hmm. And just noticing, oh, there's a part of me. There's a part of me. There's something, okay? A part of me that wants to criticize or feels critical. So as you're tuning in, right, like listening to sensation, listening to that, sometimes there's a buzz. Okay. And if you can, just like unblend from that, just notice that maybe from a distance. Sometimes if you need to, you can kind of put it behind a glass wall or kind of a one-way mirror, right? But just like, okay, notice it. Okay. That's a something that's arising, the inner critic. And just say, there's a something, there's a part of me. And that helps to create separation between you and it. It's like, there's something that wants to criticize. And it creates a little distance. And just, unblend from it. And then kind of the invitation is to notice it too. If you notice it where, with enough support, where the inner critic, because there's two things that can happen. The inner critic can trigger you, right? Make you kind of get more and more activated and up. But, what you want to do is to let the love be greater than the fear. The fear, right? That the inner critic, which is frequently angry or afraid. So let the love, which is basically the resourcing. It's like, inner critic is here. Yeah, you're doing it wrong or whatever it is. It's like, okay. Hi. You're kind of angry, inner critic, right? So just allow the resourcing to be present. Notice the inner critic and let the love be greater than the fear, love be greater than the anger. All right. But mostly love be greater than the fear. Inner critics are frequently driven by fear. Okay, that's a long answer. Let's see how far we can get. Okay, we'll go as far as we can. Recommendations for where to learn how to hold space. This is challenging because so one idea is you want to stretch, but you don't want to snap, right? So recommendations for where to learn how to hold space. We learn to hold space by rediscovering our own belongingness in the world, by feeling our own inherent, by remembering our belongingness, right? And once we remember our belongingness, we feel held, and then it's much easier to hold space. Sometimes if we think, okay, how do I hold space? It's hard. Because it's just you. But if you let yourself feel held, sometimes by the chair, the physicality of the chair, get it, that's got your back or your weight, where you feel held by that, it's easier to hold space for others, right? So the first thing just to say is recognize that it's not just you holding space. It's you being held by, and there's so many different channels, being held somatically, maybe by the chair, got your back, got your weight, got the ground underneath you, so you're held somatically that way. Maybe you're held relationally, right? By ancestry, by lineage, by people who love you. That they're there backing you up. Maybe your lineage of teachers, right? So we're better able to hold space when we feel held, or we remember our belongingness into the world. So that's what I would recommend as far as that goes. Thanks for bringing in some demos and some practices for the breakout room. Good. You're wondering about the handle. Why are we doing this step? Yeah. That's a good question, Laurie. In meditation, we often just feel without labeling, without adding anything to the top of the experience, but just allow it to emerge and noticing. I can tell you have a deep practice, right? You can say more about this. Is it thought that it helps to connect the language part of the brain to the felt sense in order to prevent overwhelm? Is it the idea that the language might bring us deeper or closer to feeling? Is it to bring felt sense more into consciousness? We can follow it no matter what and see the effect, but just wondering the intent here or benefit and my thoughts on how this contrasts to what we're doing in meditation. Wow. Deep questions there, Laurie. I don't know why this phrase comes up, but it's like in the beginning, and I'm spiritual but not religious, but like there's that phrase like in the beginning was the Word, right? So there's, I guess, what I would call the primary sensation, right? Kind of the thing that is unnamed before it has a name. And it just lives at the surface, below the surface, kind of at that edge, and we can just be with it. We don't have to name it, right? But I can tell you, like, in the process of, and you don't want to pre-name something before it's ripe and ready, but there's a way in which, at least in my experience, like, sensation comes, starts to coalesce, and as I attune to it, it's almost like it wants to be named. Well, it's like it's a way of saying hello, hi. And I can stay with just the primary sensation. Or I can say, yeah, there you are. Kind of a hot. And it's interesting, it's like when I float the word in, hot, it almost like that whole quantum mechanical thing, like the act of observation impacts the thing observed. So when I just say, hi, hot, it's almost like the sensation comes up to meet the word. It's like, and it feels like it fits. It's a satisfying feeling. I don't know. It's almost like the sensation is saying yes. Hot. Yes. like, the practice to me is a certain kind of meditation. And you can stay with the primary. And there's something about finding the shoe that fits, the slipper that fits, that feels natively satisfying and almost like helps the sensation find its home. At least that's what it feels like to me. And I don't know what the theory is. I mean, I think some of your ideas sound good. Like, I think there's like, it almost helps me ride with the feeling somehow. For me, right? Or it amplifies certain aspects of it, and you can certainly follow, but there's something in the act of naming that once it's ripe, like you don't want to name before it's ripe, but at least in my experience or my sense, it allows the next thing to happen. Like if I just stay with the primary, there's just this rich kind of river, I guess. And even when I'm saying that, it's like river, nah, it's more like throbbing, kind of. Hot. It just feels like a moment of release. Okay, it's like, I think probably what's going on is like the sensation and meaning are probably getting linked, right? And there's a little bit more integration that happens, right? The sensation's like, yeah, that's what that is. And then it almost contains it. And to me, quite honestly, focusing is a certain kind of frequently out loud partnered meditation. It's another way of talking about it. It's like a supported out loud mindfulness practice, right? Like even in meditation, sometimes you say, oh, here's thoughts. Here's sadness arising, right? Those are words that track your something. So, hope that answers your question. Whew. I should probably pause because the last time I did this, it stopped recording, and I never got done. So let's pause and then hope it saves. All right.